All right, today we've got an incredible story for you. It's a story of invention and discovery, sure, but it's also about two of the worst environmental disasters in human history. It's the tale of how one man's work managed to poison the entire planet, and how another man's work, decades later, uncovered the awful truth.
I mean, think about that for a second. The most harmful inventor in history. How does a single person even earn a title like that? Who was this inventor? And how could his creations, which were designed to solve problems, end up causing such catastrophic harm? Well, let's find out.
So, our story really revolves around two main characters: an inventor who was celebrated for his brilliant solutions, and a scientist who was on a completely different mission but accidentally uncovered the terrible price of those solutions. On one side, you've got Thomas Midley Jr., a brilliant chemical engineer, no doubt about it. He's the guy who gave the world leaded gasoline and Freon. On the other side, we have Claire Patterson, a geochemist who honestly just wanted to figure out how old the Earth was. Midley was busy creating what everyone thought were miracles of modern chemistry. Patterson, well, he's the one who would end up proving they were actually planetary poisons. Okay, so first, let's look at Midgley's work. It's the 1920s, he's at General Motors, and the auto industry is absolutely booming. But they have this big, noisy problem, a rattling sound in their engines called knock. It was holding back their power and efficiency, and Midgley's job was to find a cheap and easy fix. So after testing a ton of different compounds, he lands on this one, tetraethyl lead, or TEL for short. You add just a tiny bit of it to gasoline, and boom, the engine knock was gone. It worked perfectly. It really seemed like a miracle. For car companies and the oil industry, it was basically a license to print money. But the danger signs showed up almost immediately. At the factories producing TEL, workers started suffering from hallucinations, going insane, and then dying these horrific deaths from severe lead poisoning. So of course there's a public outcry. In response, Midgley holds a press conference, and this part is just wild. To show everyone how safe the chemical was, he poured it on his hands and inhaled its vapor for a full minute, declaring he could do it every day without any problems. It was pure corporate theater, and believe it or not, it worked. It successfully downplayed the risks for decades. So having solved engine knock, Midgley moved on to another big problem of the day. You see, early home refrigerators used these really toxic and flammable gases, like ammonia. If they leaked, they could literally kill people in their sleep. The world desperately needed a safe alternative. And so, Midgley gave us Freon. It's a type of chlorofluorocarbon, or CFC. And again, it seemed like a miracle chemical. It was non-toxic, it wasn't flammable, and it was incredibly stable. For almost 50 years, CFCs were seen as this amazing invention, a perfect, harmless solution that made modern life possible. The problem, as it turned out, was its perfection. You see, the very stability that made CFCs seem so safe down here on Earth was precisely what made them so dangerous. They didn't break down. Instead, they just drifted, totally unchanged, all the way up into the stratosphere. Once they got up there, the sun's powerful UV radiation would snap off a chlorine atom. And that single chlorine atom acted like a tiny Pac-Man, just gobbling up ozone molecule after ozone molecule. One chlorine atom could destroy up to 100,000 ozone molecules, literally tearing a hole in the planetary shield that protects all of us from harmful radiation. Okay, so now let's switch gears and turn to our second main character, Claire Patterson. He comes into our story decades later. He has zero interest in cars or refrigerators. He has one of the biggest questions in all of science on his mind. Patterson wanted to figure out the exact age of the Earth. His plan was brilliant. He was going to measure the tiny amounts of lead in ancient meteorites that formed at the same time as our planet. By comparing different types of lead, he could calculate a precise age for the entire solar system. It was a fantastic plan, except for one thing. It just kept failing. Every single sample he tested, no matter how carefully he prepared it, was contaminated with huge amounts of modern lead. It was in the air, it was in the dust, it was in his lab equipment. The lead from Midley's gasoline was literally everywhere, and it was destroying his life's work. So to get just a single clean reading, Patterson had to go to some pretty extreme lengths. He essentially invented the modern ultra-clean room. We're talking about rebuilding his lab from scratch, removing any pipes with lead solder, filtering all the air, acid washing every single surface. And in doing all this, he wasn't just purifying his experiment, he was accidentally creating a baseline that would let him measure just how polluted the rest of the world had become.
And this illustrates his discovery perfectly. He drilled into ancient Greenland ice, which basically gives us a frozen timeline of our atmosphere. For centuries, lead levels were super low, very stable. Then you see a small rise with the Industrial Revolution. But look at what happens after the 1920s. When leaded gasoline hit the roads, the amount of lead in the atmosphere just skyrockets. He had found the smoking gun.
And the contamination wasn't just in the air and ice, it was inside of us. Patterson then compared the bones of ancient humans to modern Americans. The results were just horrifying. Modern people had hundreds of times more lead in their bodies than their pre-industrial ancestors did. We weren't just living in a contaminated world, we were contaminated ourselves.
So here's the crucial point. Claire Patterson, in his quest to date the Earth, had stumbled upon a global poisoning event. His incredibly careful work finally connected Midgley's convenient invention to a massive planetary health catastrophe.
The consequences are almost too big to wrap your head around. Lead is a powerful neurotoxin. It causes irreversible brain damage, especially in children. A recent study estimated that because of childhood lead exposure, humanity as a whole has lost over 800 million total IQ points. It affected entire generations of kids. And the damage didn't even stop there. Researchers later uncovered a really chilling correlation. If you look at the data for the US, childhood lead exposure peaked in the early 70s. Then, you fast forward about 2 decades, and the violent crime rate peaks. This pattern holds true in country after country, suggesting a direct link between being poisoned as a child and a tendency towards aggression and violence later in life. So, the final toll is just staggering. Thomas Midgley's 2 main inventions were responsible for 2 separate, planet-altering disasters. You have leaded gasoline causing mass brain damage and persistent contamination, and then you have CFCs destroying the ozone layer and contributing to climate change. It's a truly unbelievable legacy when you see it laid out like this. In each case, a clever solution to an immediate problem created a slow-burning, invisible catastrophe that would take decades for us to even recognize, let alone start to fix. It is the ultimate cautionary tale of unintended consequences. And in a final, tragic bit of irony, Midgley's own life was ended by one of his inventions. After he got polio, he designed this complex harness of ropes and pulleys to help him get out of bed. And in 1944, he accidentally got tangled up in it and was strangled.
And that really brings us to our final thought. The story of Midgley and Patterson forces us to ask a really difficult question. What widely used technology, chemical, or innovation that we see as totally beneficial or harmless today might future generations look back on with absolute horror? What is the leaded gasoline of our time hiding in plain sight?